Hello, so I'm just recording some video of, so I've set up a light test environment, very light. It's got real solar system, doesn't even have real fuels. This is an all stock fueled craft. In this light environment, I set up Scatterer. I did some kind of serious tweaking of it on its own to remove various horizon effects from OpenGL. And then I installed a version of Eve RVE compiled by Blacks a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just taking a look at how that looks. So I've noticed some just oddness in the texture. Where is an example of that? Say here, where you kind of just see a repeating pattern, but I'm not entirely sure what causes that. I'm just taking observation in videos because want to be able to get as much data as I can from one run in this environment, and then basically look at how things look in different environments with differently compiled RVE versions, or if I change settings, for instance, like I was looking at changing one of the detail cloud textures. So I want objective data I can come back to compare those. So this actually does have enough fuel to get to orbit technically, just a tiny payload on the top. So let's see, with this setup we've got city lights. It's true, I should figure out some timestamp because I want to take a video near sunrise like this and during the day. So here you can see the city light textures on the ground. Can you see them from space? No. So a lot of what you're seeing, let's say more red, South America for instance, they're kind of my own settings, or quite thick atmosphere. They're just the settings that I prefer, the way I like it to look from Scatterer. And there's only specific effects that I'm looking to compare between differences of RVE. So I'll be probably putting up my Scatterer file because there were definitely some pretty crazy horizon issues with Scatterer, the way it came from, which is the settings as they come for stock. So I'd go dump the solids. It's a super basic rocket. Oh, this is all in OpenGL, by the way. I want it to all be able to run in OpenGL, and then I can test things in DirectX 11 as well, because in my experience that DirectX 11 takes a little more memory. So most of what I did to get the horizon effect to look nice was I altered the I don't remember, I did this last night. It was exposure. I think it was that exposure, not this one, but it might have been both. Oh, I wonder if actually it's a match between these two. Maybe it's a difference of exposure that was causing the issue. Testing that theory, I suppose I might see a difference, because around 55 kilometers is where I no longer have those matched. So there we go. So let's see, 2511. So I'm not high enough that it's using those values necessarily. Whoa, 25. So what about 1111? Nope. No, so it's not just about them matching. Not all that matters. So we're up where we're no longer getting too much Scatterer effect. It looks fairly good in all directions. We're getting the dark clouds because it's morning. So a launch like this is really good at showing off Scatterer and a number of cloud effects. But you can't really see much of the cloud texture from here. So right now we're at a point where it's kind of showing these spirally, I think it kind of looks cirrus to me, cloud textures. So when we end up getting a bit higher is where the reason I want to fiddle with things is because when you're actually in orbit, these actually were looking pretty pixelated to me with the RVE as is. So there's this middle range I want to note. So around 80 kilometers, the clouds just disappear. And I think that's just got to be something that's misconfigured. So that I know is worth noting. So yeah, I can see all the city lights spreading out away, and the city textures. I'll go, and the atmosphere starts to thicken up a bit here as we make the transition between the two different rendering modes. You might have heard that. Hungry morning. So the islands are showing up. So I don't quite like how the ground changes to this weird color right before transition, but I mean it's actually makes the transition less jarring. Oh, and last stage. Just a tiny payload. So in 130 kilometers, there we go, huge switch over. So when I said less jarring, perhaps that's when it's at sunrise. And I think that's one of the problems, that these settings, you might tweak them so they look really good at some certain time of day for the transition, say, but getting that transition perfect, I mean, it seems like it's a holy grail or impossible. Because I've tried it myself a number of times, and I just because of the substantial difference between PQS and scaled space and how all these graphical mods apply, I don't imagine it's possible to get that transition perfect. So I haven't messed with the not messed with, just changed the way the sun looks in this view. So I'm just specifically interested in what the clouds look like, because that's the key factor of RVE. I don't remember if the version I have. Oh, I think I can. Yeah, I can see auroras. So I can see the northern aurora and the southern aurora. Yeah, so we've got auroras in this one. See, I do like the red tinge of the Earth. That's absolutely adjustable, but I do like that tinge from space. So it looks like it's looking pretty good near sunrise here, and my memory usage is very low. Like, obviously this isn't like a full RO real fuels install memory usage. This is no realism overhaul, no real fuels. This is just for basic testing. So this memory usage will just be a benchmark comparison I use. So that was my launch. I wonder if I can come down maybe somewhere in Africa so that I can kind of see the transition back to daylight, or back to kind of a midday appearance. So yeah, the clouds look really dark near the horizon. I wonder if there's a way, because I feel like maybe in reality they don't look that way to us, maybe because we're used to the lower lights and the lower light level in general. Pitch 0. Whoa, glad I did that right before that burned out. If it had been swinging like that when burnout happened, wouldn't have been as smooth a transition. Well, yeah, this stage just wobbles like mad, but I'm not going to blame anything for that. See, I feel the clouds just look too dark from the ground, and that's probably just an optical effect because, as you approach that close to sunrise or sunset, our eyes adjust to a lower level of light. So while the clouds definitely are getting less light, in comparison to, say, what the ground is getting, they're still usually getting a bit more or something, and so they don't look as dark compared to the way the ground looks. Well, I even have the shadows, which I'm impressed by, and let's make sure I've got all the settings. I don't know if that's adjustable from here. So I've got the most recent version of Scatter. That's one difference I have between that and the Black's compile that I have, which includes a version of Scatterer, which I suppose has OpenGL effect issues and such. There's some really glaring issues which are entirely gone right now. So that is good to see. So yeah, all in all, everything looks really good. The clouds even look very good. Like, I'm not seeing the repeating texture, although that might only be visible, that only may appear to be an issue when the clouds are very white. So when I'm, say, over midday clouds, and this repeating pattern I think might just happen, I don't know if I can necessarily fix that, or that might be in a layer. But it's still worth noting in case there is something I can do about it. Because what we say is that Alt-0 brings up Eve Manager, or at least in the more recent versions. I've used a number of different versions where that's not the case. So clouds, yeah, I do have a Cirrus layer. Now, I haven't found that hitting apply or making changes here is any good. Just is a pain in the butt. It just causes everything to disappear. So might have to do some experimenting to figure out if there is a way to make things actually change in flight nicely or not. I want to decrease time warp, not thrust. Because having to reboot between changes is very difficult. It makes it difficult to make a visual comparison, and I'm in orbit. It makes it very difficult to make a visual comparison, kind of keeping it fresh in your memory, and it's very time consumptive. And that's part of why I don't fiddle with graphics like this very often, is because I just find it's not worth bang for buck of my time, because it's so time consumptive to figure out the right settings. But once I do find them, I definitely want to make sure other people can make use of them. Oh, this is what my kind of base RVE looks like from that pack. Once I'm testing, so Saab Story, SAAB, Saab Story, compiled a his own kind of remix RVE recently, and I think Pingo Pete's about to soon himself. He's been posting some teaser pictures, which have been annoying me because sometimes that doesn't end up translating to something on GitHub or where other people can make use of it. But I've seen rumors that he may be releasing that soon, which I would find awesome because his work, just as usual, looks amazing. So I might be testing that as well. But this is currently, again, this is the Black's RVE recompile using the more recent scatterer instead of what he had given me. So yeah, the clouds look really good. I think one of the weaknesses, what I'm predicting, let's just stick to this one. So the one I'm using uses, I believe, the very high res textures meant for Linux. So this, that I know it may not look like a high amount of memory usage, but that's, this is just with super base stuff, so it'll probably increase from here. So you could play a real solar system without real fuels and things. You're just limited to the stockish fuels, monopropellant liquid fuel oxidizer. So you're limited to the ISP of those stock engines. But you could use RO Mini in a case like this. So if it's more important to you that you don't need the real fuels, you don't want a lot of the realism features. Or you don't want things to represent the real Earth parts, but you do want to fly in the real Earth, you can absolutely do that. I just did that with stock empty masses, just with procedural liquid fuel tank and procedural fairing. And you could use the romini.config file on the Realism Overhaul GitHub, and that will give you the more realistic mass fractions. So you'll still have stock fuels, stock ISPs, and everything, but the empty tanks will. What they end up weighing compared to the fuel they contain will be closer to real ones. So you can get a pretty decent kind of realistic-ish experience from that. And in terms of memory, it can't be beat. You can't play in the real solar system with any less memory than I have now, having it look so nice. And this is all in OpenGL, which was kind of glitchy for me until recently. I'd switched over to DirectX 11. Nathan Kell said it was behaving well, so I did that. But yeah, so I'm in orbit here, and it all looks really good. The textures are very high resolution, so I predict when I test out other things, they'll use less memory because they'll be using less intensive textures. But there you go. Yeah, I might post these up, but ultimately my goal will be a final conclusion video where I compare all these. But if you want to just look at them yourself, if you're a graphic mod voyeur, you just want to see how they look, kind of look before you buy or look before you install. None of this costs anything beyond the basic Kerbal Space Program. Here will be a chance for you to see what's going on. I'm sorry, this is the one, just kind of my baseline, what I was using to make my Altair videos, that you won't be able to get. Like, I don't think Black's published this anywhere. It was just a compile I got. Hopefully you watch the other videos if you enjoyed this. Like if you like, dislike if you don't. And then you can see what it looks like, kind of what we get Eve, RVE, and Real Solar System to look like with some other packs, and you can see the memory difference, and I'll point out my various observations. But the big weakness with this one, I suppose, was that cloud just kind of disappearing where it matters the most, in that 80-kilometer range. Goodbye.